just want to say a big welcome to you. And my name's Lee Wellard, and as you can probably tell, I'm not from around here. My accent's from down under, real down under, Australia. Okay, but we live in Kentucky, and I brought my wife here and my daughter, and I'll introduce them. Well, actually, is Emily coming soon? Okay, all right. Okay, well, if you'd like to stand, honey, this is my beloved wife, Amy, and she came with me to help me in the work over here, and we are happy to be here. It's been a good week. Have you had a good week?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So I'm looking forward to the next few days, and I hope you are too. We're going to be covering autoimmune disease. For those who don't know, I'm a herbalist and naturopath, and we have a ministry called the American Herb Shop. We provide botanical remedies around the country, and we are delighted to be here in Black Hills. We've had a nice time with the guests so far. We look forward to continuing that. And I'm going to try to condense a couple of things in tonight. I've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to have to talk quicker or click faster. One of those two. So, all right. Well, make yourself at home, and we will start now. So, let's start with a word of prayer, if you don't mind. Let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for this group has come. I pray it be informative. I pray it be educational, and that it be practically useful in our day-to-day lives. And Father, we just invite your presence at this meeting tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Does anyone here know anyone who's got an autoimmune condition? All right. It may not be you, maybe the person sitting next to you, right? So I hope this is going to be a help. I'm going to cover a lot of information. Some of it you may miss. If you want the presentation, you can come and see me. I'm happy to share it with you. And so we'll be looking at when self is the enemy. Why do you think the body actually turns on itself? It seems like we went originally... Whoa. Okay. That woke us up. Okay. All right. Yeah, well, that's what happens in the body when the immune system goes wrong. Okay. So, so autoimmune is, as you know, when the body turns on itself. So there are a number of things that cause this, and it has a lot to do with inflammation, okay, and affecting the cellular communication between the local tissue and the white blood cells. And inflammation can do that. So we're going to be looking at a lot of things that can cause that. So in the beginning, we didn't have any autoimmune diseases, did we? God made everything good. And in the end, we have to go back to the beginning, right? So right now, in society, in America and around the world, we have a lot of these conditions. You notice that many of them are very common, right? You see any common ones there, like Crohn's and inflammatory bowel and fibromyalgia? Actually, is arthritis up there? No, it's not there, but rheumatoid is up there?
Yeah,
Oh, yes, okay. Look at that, it's so close I couldn't see it. Diabetes, another one. So these are just to name a few, but there are literally hundreds of these conditions. So I'm going to try to break it down. I won't be able to go over all these conditions, but I'm going to try to give you a foundational understanding to how we can offset pretty much all of these conditions from happening in the first place. So what perturbs the system? Okay, you probably have seen we've become more sedentary over the years. 40 years ago, 75% of our vocational work actually was centered around physical activity, and now it's the opposite. 25% of our work is centered around the couch or a computer screen, right? Okay, so this can cause, like a car idling, it can cause fumes to build up in the body, and that can cause inflammation. It's not like exact fumes that occurred in giving off a gas when we start a car, but it gives you the same illustration that basically idling the body where there's not much happening, not much blood circulation. And I mentioned this before, that one of the best ways to bring healing to any part of the body, and it occurs for all disease, is to increase blood flow. So exercise, of course, helps in that process. And so if you want to, start getting exercise, it's going to help to reduce that inflammation. And of course, perfect health depends on this perfect circulation. Anything that impedes circulation is going to cause bodies to be set up for inflammation. Okay, and inflammation increases when blood flow is congested and slowed. As a result, autoimmune inflammatory diseases are more likely with a sedentary lifestyle, now tight clothing as well, or cold extremities. Anything that's constricting the blood or the blood vessels, or affecting the heart, so it can't pump sufficiently. All right, so do you know that mental work is more taxing on the body than physical work? Yeah, it is. Overworking our brain, okay, this can increase inflammation. Do you know that depression is inflammatory? Yeah, it is. And all chronic disease has one thing in common: it's pro-inflammatory. Every chronic disease. And this includes autoimmune. Inflammatory diseases are significantly more active in those doing mental work compared to those who are in physical labor. And for those who like to take notes, we've got references down the bottom to medical journals to validate what is on the screen here. So, more visceral fat is going to increase the body's core temperature. It may only be 1 degree depending on the level of fat that we have, and this pushes inflammation, and this creates oxidation, and this in turn can lay a foundation for more miscommunication between the immune cells. Okay, so what about the ideal weight? Studies show that whole body inflammation increases with increasing body weight. Being overweight increases the risk of acquiring an autoimmune inflammatory disorder by a whopping 275%. Isn't that amazing? 275%, just increasing the weight beyond the body's natural limits. Okay, and we have an internal body clock that is set up on this circadian rhythm. And it's set up so that our hormones are secreted at certain times of the day in accordance with the laws of nature. But if this is broken, let's say you do night shift, for example, or you're eating all different times of the day, and maybe eat one meal a day, just all day, okay, or snacking, this type of thing, this can set us up also to have more inflammatory particles going around. And so meals should be set times, okay? I know sometimes we travel and we have to synchronize with a new situation, but as a general rule, try to keep it consistent. Sleeping times are very insufficient or shifted to a late bedtime or late rise time. A job requires shift work where daily schedules vary on some days, such as on days off or weekends. Now, when it comes to shift work, one of the worst types of shift work is where you alternate, where you do one day on and then one night on and then one day off. That type of thing where you're flipping from day to night, night to day, that actually severely increases your risk of autoimmune diseases, okay? And it will shorten your lifespan for about 10 to 12 years. Okay, and it will cause dementia, it will cause memory loss, it will cause hormonal dysregulation, it will cause thyroid dysfunction. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to had night shift work and leading invariably to thyroid issues, weight issues, depression, sleep issue, memory issues. It just goes on and on. So if you can keep you know, as much as possible. I know it's hard with some work, but if you can just be consistent, and if you do work part of the night, try to get a nap in the morning. All right, that can certainly help. Sleep loss is associated with increased inflammation and autoimmune diseases. Now, some people can thrive off 6 hours or less a day of sleep. That's 5% of people. But 95% of us need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Now, if you get too much sleep, you can also set yourself up for autoimmune disease as well. And in fact, you can triple your risk of diabetes on 9 hours or more of sleep a night. You can double your risk of diabetes on 6 hours or less a night. So, so there's a balance here. As I said, some people can function normally, all right? But we don't want to function abnormally unless then we need, especially when we can avoid it. Emotional stress, all right? You heard of that word? Emotional stress or burnout provokes inflammation, increases the risk of cardiovascular disease and autoimmune inflammatory disease. And emotional stress can hit us quite hard, okay? Loss of a job, loss of a loved one, financial crisis, midlife crisis, all these changes that are traumatic to us can be very, very hard on the adrenals. And the adrenals with a high cortisol level, that's what sets us up for autoimmune disease. Having experienced major stressful life events within the last 2 years increases the risk of autoimmune inflammatory disorders by 140%. Okay, and then we have post-traumatic shock also. And I remember after 9/11, there was a lot of people having heart attacks 1 year after that, post-traumatic stress disorder. So sometimes it doesn't hit us straight away because the body's in so much stress that it has to survive, it has to cope. And often it's when we're resting, when our body's in a chance where it's out of danger, that's often where the body starts to show the effects of that stress. Okay, could I have 12,000 units of antioxidants with that fried chicken and large fries? Okay, you get the picture. A deficiency of antioxidants favors oxidative stress because antioxidants stabilize free radicals and they prevent us from rusting out on the inside. And so this can lead to an increase in autoimmune diseases with low antioxidants, right? So things like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E. Oxidative stress kills cells. The immune system then makes antibodies to their spilled DNA. All right, so this is how the mechanism is set up to alter the DNA, and of course you alter the DNA and you can't correct. If you don't correct that quickly, then cancer can set in. Many autoimmune inflammatory diseases are identified by the presence of anti-DNA antibodies. Interesting. This is working on a cellular level, and it's working also on that DNA of the cell. And because the more inflammation you get, the more changes can take place to that DNA. And thankfully, we have mechanisms to keep this in check. So we have little enzymes called editase. They zip up and down the DNA looking for typing mistakes, just like an editor reading a book. And if they find some, then scissor enzymes are notified, and they come along, splice that out, gets put back together, and you know nothing about it. You slept through the whole process. Okay? And this happens countless times every day, and we don't have any problems until there's more damage done than the body can repair. And that's when things can come into play, like cancer, for example. Okay. Be careful of too many condiments and spices and things like shop-bought refined salt. Yes. Salt is good, but not all salt is created equal. And the stuff you buy in the store is just sodium chloride with a bit of aluminum in there. Aluminum, by the way, is not something we need in our body. Okay? And this can cause oxidative stress. It can cause hardening of the arteries in the brain, and it can just set us up for more inflammation. So just be aware of that. Having too many hot peppers. I'm in favor of hot peppers like cayenne as a medicine, but you want to be careful having them as a food too much when it's too strong. Caffeine is another one. Once inflammation starts in the body, caffeine can accelerate it, get that, by 300 to 600%. Wow, who would have thought of that? Caffeine. Isn't that stuff good for us? It keeps us alert, gives us energy, okay? But it whips our adrenal glands. You seen one of those jockeys that get the horses across the finish line? Well, it's just like caffeine. It's that whips the adrenals, gives us a little energy, short burst of energy, but then it throws you off the cliff at the end of the day, completely collapse. Alcohol also can increase free radical formation, and the whole body can be affected by this. Well, isn't grape juice or alcohol got resveratrol? Isn't that good for us? Well, yeah, it's in the grape. You can get resveratrol, but you don't need the alcohol, okay? Yes. Wine can be especially aggravating, worsening such inflammatory diseases as cancer, and of course, smoking. You know how many chemicals in a common cigarette? 3,000 chemicals. Nicotine is just one of them. Yeah. If you can get someone to stop smoking for just 10 minutes at a time, because the temptation to smoke, it lasts for about 10 minutes. And if you can keep them distracted for 10 minutes, you can, if you can do that a few times a day, because it happens a few times a day, if you get past 2 days, that nicotine's out of your body. After that, it's psychological addiction. It's not chemical addiction. Yeah, so the good news is you can get off. But I'll be honest with you, getting off cigarettes is the most challenging addiction for anyone. Even heroin is easier to get off than tobacco. And they actually make it that way. So it's very hard to get off once you start. All right, so anyway, it's bad news for the immune system, put it that way. So if you look at these social drugs, coffee, alcohol, tobacco, okay, look at the risk associated with this, okay, just common use, 118%, 98% alcohol, tobacco, 65%. You put them all together, one paves the way for the other. If you have coffee, you're more susceptible to have an addiction for cigarettes, and vice versa, and alcohol as well. So mold is another one. Mold, get this. Mold in the environment increases the risk of autoimmune inflammatory disorders 180% for the lungs and 380% for joints. Now, 1 in 4 houses have mold in the United States. Serious mold. Okay, so you want to deal with this because mold is very, very hard to get rid of once you get it in your lungs. You can get rid of it, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But I have seen so many people who have respiratory problems, immune suppression, mental fog, having trouble breathing, even trouble getting out of bed in the morning because of mold. All right, so you got to deal with the mold. Try to get rid of that as soon as possible. Make sure you get sunlight exposure, fresh air circulating. Because once this sets in your walls of your house, it's very hard to get out. All right, so make sure those basements are looking clean of mold. Shade trees, shrubbery, close and dense around the house, leaves decaying, compost heaps, sauna baths, wet basements, swamps, and lowland, all sources of inflammation. All right, don't we love this stuff? Aflatoxins, okay. Yes, aflatoxins they're not just in peanuts, by the way. They can be in cheese, wine, vinegar, any food created by rotting or fermentation. And aflatoxins can create autoimmune disorders. All right, also too much oil and vinegar. Most of the oil you get in the store is not true olive oil, even if it says so. You really want to make sure that what you're getting is the true stuff. It should be colored, slightly green, and a little sediment in there. All right, but many of the oils and vinegars can cause fermentation, or they can be rancid, and they can compromise the immune system. And also snacks as well. Fried potatoes, salty snacks, desserts, processed meats, among the top instigators of elevated oxidative stress and whole body inflammation. All right, so choose your snacks carefully. In fact, you don't really want to have a snack. Anytime you snack between a meal, you start the digestion all over again, and you delay digestion, and it's very hard on the body. You can get used to it, so your body doesn't mind, but it's not good for your health.
Your own fermenting, like from your garden, making your own fermented?
You mean like fermented sauerkraut, things like that?
Carrots, sauerkraut.
Yeah.
You can do just about all of that. With just a
You know,
salt brine.
you're not going to like what I say here.
Probably because I do ferment
Okay.
my vegetables.
All right. You want the good, the bad, or the ugly? All right. So with fermentation, now there is natural fermentation that takes place in the body, in the bacteria, in the small and large intestine. And there is good bacteria and bad bacteria, and there's good fermentation, bad fermentation. But think about the process of fermentation. What are you doing? You're actually transferring it into basically a state where it is starting to rot, starting to go off, right? Look at the grape. You get a grape, you ferment it, what do you end up with? Alcohol, yes. Well, vinegar is actually twice fermented. They get the alcohol and then they add acetic acid to it, it becomes acetic bacteria. They add acetic bacteria to it, it becomes acetic acid. So you spoil something when you ferment it naturally, right? It's decaying. If you look in the Bible, you'll find that fermentation is a symbol of something bad going off. It's like they used to take the leaven out, destroy the leaven because it represented sinfulness. So personally, there are some things that are more dangerous than others, but as a general rule, I just stay away from fermented products, just because it's, you always transfer it to a state where it's more deteriorated than you previously started with. So that's my 2 cents worth. I can talk more about it in person with you, but you look at all the fermented products. You look at vinegar, for example. It really plays havoc to the body. It can affect iron absorption. It can interfere with digestion. It can affect the hydrochloric acid production. Okay, it can lead to a clotting problem with the body being able to clot properly. Okay, so plus fermentation can lead to alcohol being formed in the body, right? You can do that just taking milk and sugar. You can ferment that, have a little custard, end up with some alcohol in the body, right? So anyway, just my 2 cents worth is, if it's going off, then is it really healthy? I know there's a lot of people that promote it as a healthy thing and they give a lot of science behind it, but I haven't found it to be the case that it's actually helping most of the time. It may give a short-term temporary relief, right? Like vinegar could affect digestion temporarily in a positive way, but it could also lead to longer-term issues down the road by causing a rebound effect with the hydrochloric acid. So I personally stay away from it. Sugar-coated disaster. Okay, a diet high in refined carbohydrates negatively affects the balance of free radical generation and antioxidant defense, leading to inflammation overload. Now, refined carbs are a big problem, and if you go to the store, you'll find that many of them have no nutritional value whatsoever left. And then on top of that, they're often pasteurized and they use high fructose corn syrup in there, lots of different other genetically modified organisms. And this is just messing us up. It's messing our digestion up severely. There's hardly anyone I meet nowadays that has good digestion. And it all starts up here, because this is where everything gets broken down and absorbed. And if that's messed up, then something else is going to go wrong down the pipeline. So, yeah, cornflakes. Look at this. Bowl of cornflakes with skim milk, piece of toast, glass of orange juice converts. By the way, this is the standard breakfast that's recommended for a diabetic from the Diabetic Association of America. 16 teaspoons of sugar. All right, is that really helping you? That's setting you up for not only autoimmune, but diabetes and inflammation, oxidative stress. And look at the breads that we have nowadays. It's so far removed from what is really good, wholesome grains. I went into the store one time, I had my son with me, and I grabbed some white bread, and I said, "Hey, look at this, John," and I just squashed it down to about this thick, just like an accordion, but it didn't spring back. I felt bad because I left it on the shelf, But anyway, I get another one, and it bounced back. I said, that's what it should be like, right? You should have the fiber there, because it's not just a broom. It helps regulating blood sugar. It helps lowering inflammation. It helps take out toxins out of the body. And also you've got the bran there, you've got the minerals there, the magnesium there, the zinc there, the good source of oils and vitamin E and selenium and all these types of things that can help. Unfortunately, whole wheat has been perverted nowadays. So it's not the same, all right, because they've genetically modified it. And then they put glyphosate in there. And then you end up with a antibiotic in your stomach from the pesticides that you've just eaten through the wheat. So be careful. I'm not against grains, just choose them wisely, okay? So fiber and magnesium deficiency associated with a 300 to 400% elevation in inflammation. So that's good to know. That means that if you can include that back in your diet, then you can reduce the inflammation, right? And then look at this, sugar. These are some of the top causes of inflammation and autoimmune as far as foods go. All right, look at that. All right, vegetable fat is on the least there, but look at that sugar. Most sugar now is from GMO beets, genetically modified beets. Now there is a lot of sugar cane as well, but this is a big problem because most Americans are consuming about 3 pounds of sugar per week. And it's highly inflammatory. It's highly, highly inflammatory. And so, and cholesterol, oxidized cholesterol, eggs, saturated fat, soft drinks. Soft drinks, a big one. You can put on 30 pounds of fat every year just consuming 2 soft drinks a day. All right. Am I standing on anyone's toes? Okay, I hope not. I'm just sharing this information. What you do with it is up to you. But look, you just have to replace it with the good stuff. That's all. You just have, I'm not saying get rid of your oil, or just get a better quality oil. If you have a sweet tooth like me, use some natural unprocessed honey, or maybe you could use some coconut sugar or date sugar, or even better, have some fruit. So, God doesn't want us to feel unsatisfied. He says He satisfies every living thing, and that includes food, right? So, the problem with oil is it's so highly refined and it's heated to such a high temperature that it ends up converting unsaturated fat to saturated fat, and this does oxidative stress in the body, and this can promote an autoimmune response. So it can also knock out those double bonds and cause trans fats. So if you look at the packets on the products you buy, often they say 0 trans fats, and that says per serving. But if they can get the serving size so that the trans fats is under 1 gram, they can technically put 0, and it can be full of trans fats, but you just don't know anything about it. You're totally ignorant to how much is in there. And so cooking oil, especially fried food, repeatedly fried food, right? So often you go to a restaurant and they may have these deep fried French fries, and they use that oil time and time and time again, and that's really, really bad for you. And these trans fats, they can basically cause oxidative stress in the body, require more antioxidants from the body to help stabilize the free radicals, and they can do vascular damage in the inside of the endothelial cells. Ice cream is one classic way to help with atherosclerosis and set yourself up for autoimmune diseases. And this is a big issue. I think the government ought to know about this, don't you? Okay. All right, so what about cheese? All right, you've seen a block of cheese. I used to love cheese, have those cheese pizzas. You could eat all you want for $5. And do you think you stop at one piece? Eat the whole thing, right? 12 pieces, and then you feel it in your stomach 13 hours later. Yeah, it feels like glue, right? It's very hard to digest, and this type of oxidated cholesterol can be very damaging. Set yourself up for autoimmune reactions. So, plus they can cause allergies. A lot of your upper respiratory tract allergies, and one of the number one foods associated with heart attacks is cheese. And I've seen surgeons pull these long threads of cheese out of the arteries after someone's had a major heart attack. It's very, you don't want to see that after you've just eaten, especially in cheese. Okay, but this dramatically increases your risk of heart attack, atherosclerosis, and autoimmune diseases. So, yes, eating the same foods day after day can set you up for autoimmune diseases. I remember a lady in Australia, she loved mangoes one day. I mean, Australia has great mangoes, and she ate 20 mangoes in one meal. And she was allergic to mangoes after that. She had a reaction. And if you eat the same foods time and time again, it's just like living with your in-laws 24/7. It sets up some reactions. Okay, so you need a break. You need some healthy break. And so if you're exposing your food to the same chemistry day after day, it can actually turn some of the good food into something that you get an allergic reaction for. And you can actually reverse that, but it's going to take some time because the body gets very sensitive to foods that are continually flooding the system. Even things like oatmeal can happen too. Having too much variety of food, that's another problem. I remember when I was in Japan, Japanese have the highest incidence of stomach cancer in the world. And they traced it back to the amount of varieties of food they ate. Because in Japan, they believe that it is healthier to have more variety, and so they have a saying, you need to eat 200 different types of food every day. And so often they put this in one meal. I remember I went to a Japanese retreat, and we had a table between two of us of food, and they brought 28 different plates of food to us. Some were big, some were small, and this really plays havoc with digestion. It's very hard. The more complexity of food you have in the digestive system can create more problems to break that down and lead to autoimmune diseases established. Now, some of you already know this, but the gluten connection. Gluten is the protein component of wheat. It's called gliadin, which is really at the heart of it, and basically that goes into the microvilli, and these little receptors in the microvilli that basically open the villi up so that food can go through, or should I say pre-digested food go through, and the gluten can connect with these receptors, and it can cause these villi to open up too much and allow undigested food particles to go through and create autoimmune disease. Okay, you're going to probably be wondering what you can eat at the end of this. A statistic, the higher amount of dairy and meat products, the greater the risk of autoimmune disease. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons why. It's not just one reason. You've got a lot of pathogens in meat. I don't know how meat could be any worse for you than they do in these meat processing plantations, because there's feces everywhere. They have cancers, and they often just let them go, and they feed them GMO corn, and these cows aren't allowed outside to just roam around and eat grass, and they're given growth hormones, and all these things have a dramatic effect, set you up for autoimmune disease. Red meat is another one, creates oxidative stress. Too much iron in the blood can also do this. Even organic iron and supplementation can do the same thing, and it can increase the risk of autoimmune disease by 130%, just the consumption of red meat. This is in a moderate amount on a daily basis. So, how to avoid food poisoning in polymicrobial restaurants. Yes, food poisoning is a big one, isn't it? I occasionally come across some news articles that say there was thousands of people that ended up having food poisoning, like salmonella, from eating greens, like spinach. Spinach is a big one. And they found it wasn't the spinach per se, it was the runoff of the feces that went on the spinach. So just make sure that you wash your greens, okay? So there's a lot of bacteria. But if you've got good stomach acid, you can actually dissolve this. But if you've got poor stomach acid, if it's above 3.8, then the bacteria do not get properly taken care of by the acidity of the hydrochloric acid, and also your bile is necessary to act as a detergent to these microbes. So they just go in your system, and they are very, very clever. They're very sneaky, and they cover themselves up. They can secrete different enzymes, changing the pH level. They can do all kinds of things, and to avoid being detected by the immune system. Worms is another one, okay? So a lot of parasitic infections nowadays. So if you're dealing with animals, cats and dogs, I'm sorry to say, I love cats and dogs, but if they're in the home, there's a good chance that they can actually give you worms, all right? Be careful about them licking your face and everything like that. I always cringe when I see dogs licking people's faces, but when you know where they've licked before. But anyway, just be careful. We can help with this. There are some things that are anti-parasitic. So you want to know what they are? Anyone want to know? Okay, black walnut. There's wormwood. There's clove. There's garlic. There's papaya seeds. Bitter things. Bitter things, parasites don't like bitter things. They like sweet things, right? And they like to eat all your nutrition. Some of these parasites, they stay in your system for several years. And they just eat up all your goodies, all your nutrition. They just feed off of it. And you get slim and thin, and you're wasting away, and you're wondering what's going on. So if you're having digestive issues, you're eating well, and you're not sure what's going on, maybe you just feel, you're not absorbing the nutrition, then maybe you should look at, could be a parasitic thing. Just take a stool test, and that could show that these things are occurring. But this can cause all kinds of situations with inflammation and affect the joints in particular. Food additives is another thing. There's so many food additives on the market today. We had this can recently, of those fruit cocktail, and on the label it said natural red color, and it gave a number, and when I looked up the number, it said it was from ant's blood. Well, that's natural, isn't it? Okay, all right, and then you got all these chemicals. If you can't pronounce them, chances are it's not good for you. Okay. So food additives can cause changes of behavior, especially in young people. Coloring agents and dyes, all this type of thing. Just try to stick with as natural as you can. If the label sounds more like an introduction to a book, you may want to just discard it. All right, so, boy, baking soda is another one that can increase the risk of stomach cancer if you take too often too much. Excessive caloric intake. All right, so you're taking in more than you're burning up, and this can increase. We looked at the weight. This is directly contributing to the weight gain and inflammation in the body. And did you know that indoor air contaminants are often a source of inflammation, such as you see here, such as these aspergillus, aflatoxins, breathable dust, nitrogen dioxide, formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is in quite a few things, actually. It's even in the carpets. People put it, the new carpets nowadays have formaldehyde in them. I'm not saying get rid of your carpet, but you can get some natural air purifiers made of charcoal that can actually help with that. Especially if you're going into a new home, you may want to purify the air. And of course, we mentioned mold before. Heavy metals. Heavy metals are a big one, right? There's some people, they've got different plates in them and screws in them, nuts and bolts. Yeah, so if you've had some heavy metals, and that can be from food, it could be from the dentist, it could be from, you know, eating out of canned food, it could be from dealing with paints, it could be skincare products. There's a lot of different things out there that have heavy metals in them. And some of the worst are lead, cadmium, mercury, and aluminum. These are some of the big ones you want to avoid. Mercury is one of the worst, okay? Methylmercury is very, very toxic. It can destroy nerves very, very quickly. Oh boy, we won't go there, but this one here, the immunization type of things, just beware and just make sure you understand what's injected in you before you succumb to that, because as you know, drug companies make billions of dollars through ignorance, and the body has innate immunity more powerful than adaptive immunity. And so if you follow the laws of health, you're going to have a greater ability to withstand pathogens. Okay, and then also, okay, there are many chemicals in the environment. Some chemical, I think I mentioned this before. I went one day to go and get some hair dye. This was before I was married. And it started worrying me with these gray hairs coming up. I used to cut them out with the scissors, but then they started multiplying. And I thought, I need to get some hair dye. So I went to get some hair dye. And then it said, put your hands in these gloves, and then put the gloves in this other set of gloves, and then you can put it on your head. And I'm thinking, well, I need 2 sets of gloves to put this stuff on my head. And thankfully, I ended up avoiding that, and my wife liked my hair. So that all worked out for good. But anyway, so be careful. Things, you know, hair dyes and coloring agents and skincare products can cause problems. They can have heavy metals, and nearly all of them have toxicity levels that express themselves in the nervous system and endocrine system. All right, so yeah, this is a big one here. Sodium lauryl sulfate. This is in nearly all your shampoos, by the way. Okay, and then, okay, chest pain. Should you be worried? Because inflammation not only affects the bones, it affects the connective tissue and joints, but heart muscle as well. Okay, so if you've had a heart attack, this can increase your risk of autoimmune by 220%, sudden cardiac death 95%, and congestive heart failure 90%. So often this has to do also with medications that can contribute to this as well. Osteoporosis, thinning of the bones. You know, I've heard it be said that you can't get away from osteoporosis. You know, sometimes the doctor says you'll have it the rest of your life. You're going to have it. There's no avoiding it. But I believe we can avoid it. don't you? I think there are some things we can do. In fact, there are ladies in Africa who have very little calcium, but some of the strongest bones in the world, and they're carrying heavy things. They get their calcium from yams, which isn't a very large amount of calcium in, but our problem is that it's not that we don't get enough calcium, it's just that we're losing a lot of calcium, and we're losing it through the lifestyle, through the acid foods, through the stress, through the pop sodas, through the caffeine and all the adrenal effects of having high cortisol levels. Okay, so many medications also laying a foundation for autoimmune disease. Did you know that? There's lots and lots of medications that can cause that. So we can exercise. Strength-resistant exercise is one of the best ways to strengthen your bones and avoid osteoporosis. Okay, and the fresh air, getting outside, physical activity. Vitamin D is great, not only for the bones, but also it helps modulate the immune system, and it's very good if you've got autoimmune disease. Now, some of you may think, well, what about lupus, systemic lupus? Aren't you supposed to keep out of the sun? That could be harmful. Well, guess what? If you have sun in moderate amounts, you don't have to worry about it with lupus. What you have to do is just take more frequency, less often. But you need vitamin D. If you don't get vitamin D, you'll be dead. So we need it. We need sunlight. If you can't get out in the sun, you're going to be dependent on a supplement. So this reduces inflammation in the body. 10% of our genes are actually dependent, 20% of our genes are dependent on vitamin D for healthy regulation of gene expression, and vitamin D deficiency increases many common cancers and also multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune, hypertensive, cardiovascular heart disease, and type 1 diabetes, which of course is autoimmune as well. It is recommended that at least 25% of your skin should be exposed to sunlight for 20 minutes each day. Now, if you're darker skin, you're going to need more than that. The problem is some people have enough sun, but they don't actually convert it to what we call the active vitamin D, the 1,25-hydroxycholecalciferol. And that is what the body uses as in an active form. And if there's problems with digestion, if there's problems with the kidneys, if there's problems with the liver, if there's problems with the mother-in-law, this can be affected. Okay, so stress, that's what I'm saying. Stress can affect vitamin D significantly. So exercise is very important, for reducing inflammation, and it's good for helping with every disease, because especially walking, because you're getting every organ receive greater blood supply. And every organ is involved in transferring blood as well. It doesn't just receive, it also helps give. It's not like every organ's like the heart in pumping it, but it does have an internal port and an external port, right? And it sort of shuns it along to the next organ. And it's very, very important to walk, because all the organs are brought into a healthy tone when we walk. All right? So, recommend regulate meal times every day of the week, not varying by more than 5 minutes, with no meal later than 5:30. This will help you with digestion. We recommend regularity in exercising every day of the week, including days off and weekends. I remember that Jesus would walk up to a high mountain and pray, so he'd actually exercise before he even prayed. Interesting. So sleep. Some of us don't get enough rest, right? That is a big problem. If you're on your feet for more than 10 hours a day, you have a high increase of heart disease, and you have a high increase for autoimmune diseases. Yeah, so we need that sleep time, and if you get the sleep before midnight, it's going to be better than after midnight. All right, how are we going for time, by the way? Someone give me a, is it 7? Because we got another talk. Okay, so, all right, let's go for another minute, okay? All right, I'm going to skip through some of these because I had 200 slides. It was way too much, wasn't it? Okay, so inflammation. Look at this. These are different diets, okay? And they equate to different levels of inflammation in the body. And the lower the number, the lower the risk of inflammation and autoimmune diseases. So whole grains, fruits, nuts, green leafy vegetables win the prize for this one. Okay, so a vegetarian diet has been found to have an anti-inflammatory effect on patients with active autoimmune inflammatory diseases. Okay, now you want your food to be tasty. Okay, it needs to be attractive, tasty, but not an idol. It's a hard balance for some of us to get, right? All right, and the foods that we get addicted to are foods that are harmful to us. You never get addicted to the things that your body needs, because what your body needs satiates you. So you feel you've had enough. So we always get addicted to what our body does not need, like caffeine, sugar, right, refined sugars. Yeah, I used to be a chocoholic, love chocolate. Now I'm addicted to carob. Okay, some things you may be addicted to that are good for you. All right, so this is important. Omega-3 fatty acids, by the way. This can lower your risk of autoimmune disease. Omega-3 fatty acids. Okay, you can get this from flax, from chia, from walnuts. Good, healthy omega-3s. All right, so I'm going to end here, even though I haven't ended. So, all right, but do we have question time? Let's have some question time. And for those who are listening, I'll try to repeat the question. We got a few minutes for questions? You have a question. Okay, you asked me a lot of questions. Okay, go ahead.
Why is it that bread and wheat and gluten-containing goods are so addictive to some of us?
Why are they so addictive? Yes.
Baked goods.
Baked goods.
What is the element that's addictive?
Well, what is the element that's addictive? Well, it's not necessarily addictive in the sense of craving, like strong craving, like a craving that, I mean, I know we smell bread and we get an appetite, but it's not an addiction that like drives you, that you necessarily must have all the time. Like gluten doesn't have any odor to it that makes you want it every single day, but wheat tends to be more tasty. So it's more appealing to that in that sense, but chemically it's not addicted. It's not addictive grain, put it that way. Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
With your flaxseed,
Yes.
you grind it, or
You can grind it. Yeah, if you grind it,
how
you
long
can it sit there. You want to take it the same day if you're going to grind it. Omega-3s, when you grind flax, they oxidate very quickly.
even if you would freeze it?
Yeah, well, if you freeze it, it's going to slow that down. Yeah, but if you expose it to normal temperature, it's going to oxidate. So your omega-3s oxidate first, then your 6s, then your 9s, and so you're not going to get as much nutrition, and they can go rancid in a short amount of time. It may take 3 days before that happens, but it's going to go off. If it's left out, yes. Yeah, but not if you refrigerate it, not if you freeze it.
Freeze it, then it would hold.
Yeah, it will hold, yes. If you freeze it, it would be fine. Okay, yes,
What's the
Jennifer.
best way to get your stomach acid test done? How do you-
Test done. You can take a 1/4 teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate in a glass of water, and you take it around mealtime, and so before you've eaten anything. And if you have some burping in the first 5 minutes, then you don't have enough stomach acid to neutralize the sodium bicarbonate. And so that means that basically you're low in acidity. So that's just one simple test.
What can you do to correct that?
Yes, good question. There are bitter herbs that can help with that. Regularity of eating. Another thing, don't drink with your meals, okay, because that will dilute the acidity. But bitter herbs, lemon juice can help as well. and just being regular in your times of eating and not eating too much, and having enough liquid, have enough water between meals, because the gastric acid is predominantly water, okay? So you need that, you know, to increase the acidity. So, yeah, those are some common ways. Bitter herbs really help as well. Anything bitter, because it stimulates the vagus nerve. B1's another one, B5's another one, choline also. And all the things I mentioned, from sleep to exercise, can affect the vagus nerve, the tone of the vagus nerve. All right. Yes.
When are you taking the bitter herbs then?
You can take them in the beginning. And the bitter herbs will stimulate the vagus nerve to send strong impulses down to the stomach, and that will increase the acid production. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Where can we find a recording of this afterwards?
Oh, you talk to that man back there. Okay. It's being recorded. I don't know where it's ended up on cyberspace. It may get banned afterwards. But yeah, he's the man. He'll have the original recording. All right. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay. No? We're all good to go? So, just to finish up here, inflammation is the foundation for autoimmune disease. If you can remember that, then you can understand the mechanism of action. Okay? When you affect the inflammation, when you affect blood supply, when you slow it down, there are different mechanisms to cause the same thing, but inflammation pushes autoimmune. All right, so let's have can we have a little 5-minute break? Is that okay? All right, so take a break and have a chat to your neighbor, and we will continue this in round 2. Thank you. All right, well, you know, I felt strongly impressed to sort of change the topic a little bit tonight. Hope you don't mind. I'll try to bring it home, and you'll learn some things about the topic without actually me dwelling as much on it, because I've been talking about hormones all week. And many of you haven't been here for the topic. But I want to bring out another component that does dramatically affect hormones. And anyway, I want to share a personal story with you. Is that okay? You fine with that? So my wife and I, we were married 21 years ago. This is first anniversary, actually, at that garden. Anyway, we were invited to come to be medical missionaries here in the Philippines. So we actually inherited this place. It's a long story. I won't bore you with the details, but well, we're invited over to this place. I've been to the Philippines for a few times, and it just so happened that our parents gave us some inheritance money right at the time we landed there. And so we ended up buying this property, and it's a beautiful property. This was food from the garden every morning. And we ended up training missionaries in medical missionary work. This is my wife giving a class here. She doesn't even know I'm presenting all these pictures. I put her on the spot tonight. But anyway, we inherited this property, a beautiful organic farm, just so peaceful. Whoops, this is our garden. Whoops, I'm not controlling this. It's going crazy here. We call it Shiloh. I have papaya down to the ground, beautiful flowers. You're probably wondering why we're here, why we're not still there. Okay. But anyway, it was, we turned it into a little bit of a wellness type of place, and we had students that were trained in hydrotherapy and massage and nutrition and physiology. And so this was our home for a few years. And so Basically, what ended up happening is after a few months being there, my wife got really sick and she couldn't sleep past midnight every night for nearly 6 years. It started here. We were on really good food, healthy program, you know, all the laws of health, exercise, sunlight, fresh air, organic gardening. You couldn't have asked for a better place to do it. And yet my wife got terribly sick to the point we had to leave this place, ended up going back to England. Wife got pregnant, we lost a child. It was just a lot of stress and trauma at the time. Anyway, it led us to, and the reason I'm sharing this background to you is because it led us to realize God led us on a journey. Okay, and at the time when you're going through a major crisis or something that is traumatic, oftentimes you try to process it and you can't sometimes figure out why. And that leads to a lot of mental torment sometimes. And it's often not till we're past that, and for different people it's different times. And so it was several years before I even could make sense of it. But it was a big question mark in my mind. Why, God, did you bring us here? Why did all these disasters happen? What was the purpose of all this? It just felt like a failure. And yet God, in His mercy, turned this into one of the greatest blessings. And so I'm going to invite my wife to come up and pick up where I left off and just share some of the experiences that ended up happening to her, because through it, God always has a plan. And this affected her hormones, this affected her sleep, her energy level, her mind. And in the process of this, God had a very beautiful experience to bring her through. And so I just wanted to pass the baton to my wife here and just have her share her story, because if it wasn't for this experience, we wouldn't actually be doing what we're doing today. So I just let her, okay, okay, I'll let you take over. Thank you, honey.
Up here? There you go. Feels like a long way down there. Well, good evening, and I'm Amy, and it's a privilege to share. I'll keep this story succinct and to the point by God's grace. So, yes, by way of introduction, a kind of segue to add to what my husband's saying, I think one of the most important components, if not the most important component in health, is the spiritual aspect, and where we are spiritually, where we put our faith, what kind of peace we have with our lives, with our relationships, the people in our lives, our emotional health. All of these things have such a major contributing part in our health that we often overlook them in the search for a solution on a physical level. You know, we're looking for the pill that's going to fix my sleep problem, or the exercise, if only I did more, or whatever it is. So this is a huge part of our understanding of health that we don't want to overlook whenever we share. So to go back to the story of the Filipino mission there, yes, it was a wonderful time, but it was from one day to the next day, I literally began to only sleep 4 hours. From 8 in the evening, I would go to bed as early as I could until midnight. And every night, bang, at midnight, I would wake up with my eyes wide awake, telling myself, I'm not stressed, why can't I sleep? It was absolutely baffling to me, because I thought insomnia is because of stress most of the time, and a lot of the time it is. So this went on for several months, and finally, like my husband said, went back to England. It had been going on for over a year, 2 years. We did have one child that we lost, and I was diagnosed with being infertile and unable to have children. And I was 35, 36. Anyway, after 3 more years of insomnia, we conceived our first child. who we kept that was healthy, and we still have. He's 15 now, and at the whole time during the pregnancy and the birth and afterwards, I was struggling terribly with not being able to sleep. And if you've had a child, you know that you don't expect to sleep the first few months of having a child. But when you've just had 4 years of hardly sleeping at all, and I had a constant headache the whole time, which you have from sleep deprivation. I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced that. But it would never go away. It was relentless, a relentless headache, and exhaustion, and inability to work. I had to quit work. I cut down gradually and eventually had to stop altogether. So I was becoming more and more frustrated during the pregnancy, of course, and despairing that if I'm so tired, how can I take care of a baby? And long story short, but at the time I was very much wanting to have a home birth, natural, no medication if possible. So that's what we did. And I had a lot of friends with me giving me hydrotherapy during the labor and giving me ice and so forth, everything natural. And the labor ended up being 56 hours of continual contractions. That was after the waters had broken. So I was in the home, I had a midwife and many friends. People were praying. And, I had prayed. I believed that God was in control. And he was, of course. But I went through a very dark experience during the labor, as you can imagine, where I really felt, this is it. I'm actually facing death in a conscious state. I'm either myself or the child, or both. We're not going to make it through this. And as I faced that near-death experience, I realized something isn't quite right with me because I have tremendous fear at this point. And as a professed Christian, why would I have fear in the face of death? Really? So I knew there was something not quite right. I didn't know what it was. Which is obviously the labor continued and the child came out. I broke my coccyx because I'd broken it before, and I was ripped badly, and it was sewn up without anesthetic. I'm sorry, gentlemen that are in the room, but I'm giving details simply to illustrate why I had postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress after that event. It was a very traumatic delivery. John, our child who was born, he was healthy, praise God. I think he did have some long-term consequences, perhaps a little, it affected his brain a little, but he's made it. And we're very thankful for that. So after this traumatic delivery, I thought, great, it's all over. I'm going to get better now. Everything's going to get better. But it didn't, and because of the compounding effect of the traumatic delivery and the insomnia, I started to have terribly hallucinogenic type nightmares. Sleep deprivation can set you into that within 72 hours of sleep deprivation if you're a normal, healthy person, but I had had deprivation for at least 4 years. So then I also went into post-traumatic stress syndrome, nightmares, reliving, etc. I don't need to give you the details. And then postpartum depression within about 4 or 5 weeks of the birth. So with myself being the way I am, I didn't want to tell anyone that I was going through what I was going through. It's very hard when you become very mentally unwell to tell someone, even to verbalize it. It's very difficult for some people. So I didn't tell anyone how serious this really was, and it got worse into psychosis and suicidal thoughts and so forth. Not that I wanted to harm myself or anyone, it was just the chemical imbalance was so great from all the compounding factors that that's what my brain came up with. And of course, in the middle of all this, I'm praying, my husband's praying, we believe God is in control. We don't understand, we don't have the answers. And I'm searching for a remedy for me so I can take care of the baby. And I'm looking at herbs, nutrition, exercise. I'm doing everything right that I think I should do to get well. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. You're doing everything you know, but it still doesn't fix the problem. So my eyes were really heavily focused on getting myself well. Every single day I would hike for miles, take the baby with me, but my nervous system was in a shattered condition, and not many people really knew what I was going through. Long story short, after about 3.5 months like this, I I went to a sermon at church. I was able to get to church, and my husband was there with me. And the preacher was preaching on the book of Revelation, the church at the end of the world, Laodicea. And it says there, if you're familiar, I'm sure many of you are familiar, it says in Revelation chapter 3, verse 17, that this church would not recognize their spiritual condition. And the preacher brought this out and said, do you know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked? Please raise your hand. And yes, people were confused because the scripture says you don't know that you are this. And so when the preacher said, are you? Wait, but the scripture says I'm not, but I know that I am spiritually. So there was confusion, and in that moment, I realized there is something much deeper wrong with me than just having postpartum depression and a nervous breakdown. There's something much deeper, and I can't even put my finger on it. So I went home after that sermon, and I realized something deep inside me was crumbling, and I prayed like I'd never prayed before, and I sought God to understand him as I had never understood him before. And I can honestly say that from that moment, a revelation, I began to understand more about God, more about myself than I ever had in my 40 years of life. On the floor of my bedroom, the Lord revealed to me, I believe, an understanding of what he went through for me on the cross. And I said, Lord God, if you're there, why are you not healing me when I'm going through so much and I need to take care of a baby? You're breaking my heart, God. And he turned it all around and said to me, Amy, I am not breaking your heart, but you are breaking mine because you have lost your first love. You are now lukewarm. You are neither hot nor cold, just like Revelation 3:17 says of the final church. And from that moment, God had diagnosed my deep condition that I was kind of aware of, but not really. I couldn't put my finger on it. Right then, I had an awareness that he had done something profoundly deep inside me and changed me in a deep way so that suddenly it didn't matter if I didn't get better. I don't know if that makes sense, that suddenly the priorities in my life shifted completely. Prior to that, I was completely focused on getting well. Nothing else mattered, but I have to be well so I can take care of my baby. But all the time, God knew he was going to take care of my baby. Even with all my brokenness, or with all my issues, and all my problems, he was going to do it. But he needed to get to the deeper core health problem that I had, which was spiritual. And I share this to encourage all of us that, you know, often we don't understand the journey, we don't understand the pain, why, and the process and where he's taking us, where God is taking us, is of far greater significance than the immediate healing that we so much desire and that he does want to give us as well, but it's secondary to his desire to heal the soul. And I think on my bedroom floor, God took my heart that I had thought I had given to him. I thought it was his. I thought I was completely surrendered to God's plan for my life. I mean, after all, I've been a missionary, right? But just doing for God does not equate to really loving God and being in love with him. So after that experience, I felt like I was the baby again. And I spiritually was needing to grow and understand and learn. Of course, I was searching the Bible every day. And I said to the Lord, are you going to heal me now? Because now I understand that you've done deep heart surgery in me where I've fallen in love with you again. So am I safe for you to heal me? And can God trust me with health if he's converted my heart? And I was very nervous about praying that prayer for a while. But it took another 2 years of mental debilitation and insomnia. Only 4 hours, 3 hours sleep a night, every single night for 2 more years. But I can honestly say that though I was so desperate, I was nothing like the desperation I was before. And those 2 years became the sweetest experience of my life, learning to walk with God, learning to walk in in love, as I never had before. And it's very sweet. That was when the suffering became a sweet experience instead of a bitter one. And I just, wherever we're at tonight, I know that everyone's at different points, but wherever we're at, God has got it covered. And our journey doesn't take him by surprise. He's in complete control of everything we're going through and where he's leading us. And it's so encouraging to know that and to rest in that. No matter how bad it seems right now, we can rest in that. And I won't talk too much longer. I want my husband to share the hormonal facts and science that he's gifted at sharing. But I would add that when I was diagnosed as being infertile at 35, God had promised my husband that he would have a son, and that child did come when I was 39. And at the time, we didn't have any knowledge of how herbs can help us. I didn't know that red clover increases estrogen and can cause ovulation and pregnancy. So when it came to our second child, who's in the other apartment there, she's now 11, I took red clover and Vitex. Vitex is very progesteronic. It nurtures the uterus, and it enables the baby in the first trimester to be adequately fed so that the womb won't expel the baby, which I think is what happened with our very first conception. I was very low progesterone. So with the second child, we had Vitex, and that enabled my uterus to hold the embryo so she could develop. So Vitex and red clover are probably two of the best kept secrets, if you like, in women's health. IVF would be out of business if they knew that how effective Vitex and red clover are for fertility. I also use them for PMS in between the two pregnancies. I use Vitex for that. That really helps modulate premenstrual syndrome and regulates the cycle. It's probably one of the best herbs I know for menopausal issues as well. Not so much the hot flashes, but the mood swings of menopause. So wherever we're at, ladies, Vitex is such a good herb. I wish that I'd known about it 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So those two herbs really helped me through. And you may be wondering, did I get out of the sleep thing? So 2 years after I had John, in the middle of the night, I said, Lord, I really would like to be able to sleep. Would that be okay? Could you show me what can I do? And the Lord led me to my husband's textbook by a British man, David Hoffman. He's a scientist, a herbal scientist. And there's a passage in there, if the book fell open at nervous exhaustion. And when I read it, I thought, that's me. I have nervous exhaustion. What's for that? And it said oat straw. It's used for horses to make their coats shine and makes them very virile. It affects the hypothalamus pituitary axis. So it feeds the nervous system and then impacts the endocrine system. As soon as I read that, I said, oh, that's it, I've got to go and get some. So I went to the herb store the next day. I made a quart of tea out of oat straw. And that night I slept 6 hours for the first time in 6 years. Yes. So I thought, this is working, I'm going to do it again the next day. Next day, same thing. I slept 7 hours. Next day, and I kept doing that, and I eventually got back to 8 hours sleep within about 2 weeks. Yeah, if only all insomnia could be cured that easily. But if you get the right cause for the insomnia, mine was mineral depletion from massive stresses over a number of years, and possibly poor diet, I don't know, in the Philippines, I'm not sure. So I was so grateful for that experience, so grateful, that after that I ventured to have another child. So again, Vitex and red clover, we conceived Emily within 2 weeks of using those two herbs. So we've used them many times since with other women that want to get pregnant, and very often it's within the first cycle they conceive a child. And we also learned after that 56-hour labor with John, I thought there's got to be some herbs to shorten labor, to decrease childbirth pain, etc. So we did some research and we found squaw vine, the partridge berry for ladies. American Indians have used it for a long time, obviously. for quick deliveries and for toning the uterus. So we made a concoction with squaw vine, partridge berry, spikenard for pain, the same spikenard that was used to anoint Jesus. And was there one other in there? Red raspberry leaf to tone the uterus. And my second labor was only 3 hours. And the dilation went from 3 to 10 within about half an hour. So rapid dilation, fast contractions of about 90 seconds, rapidly. So my husband was doing 90 miles an hour down the road to the hospital. I couldn't get there fast enough. I almost delivered before I got to the room. So I'm so grateful. These herbs are such a blessing, and I'm more grateful that God allowed me to have these experiences so that my husband could then share with a much wider audience and help many more people.
Often we get, as my wife mentioned, we get so fixated on a method that we lose sight of the master. And we don't realize, and God wants to use, He can use methods. At the same time, He wants us to see Him behind the method. He wants us to trust Him more than the method. And I know that if we put our trust in something else or some other method, that even if it's a good method, but we're not fully trusting Him in the process, then often He will not allow that to work, because He won't get the full glory from the things that He has entrusted us with. So I am so glad that He knows how to calibrate hormones. He knows how to fix sleep. He knows how to bring forth children into the world. And I just want to thank God, because through that experience my wife went through, it enabled us to stand on a larger platform to be able to help others. So I always tell people our suffering is often someone else's medicine. So you may not be going through an experience just for yourself. It may be to help someone else in their journey. So God never wastes suffering, but He does do a great job in channeling it for good. He doesn't bring suffering, but He allows us to turn that suffering into a blessing to someone else, that we can relate to them, we can empathize with them, and share with them what we've experienced on our journey towards health, and hopefully to eternal life, right? Because all of us in this room are not going to be here in about 100 years, right? Okay, but we want to be here. I don't want to live to 100. I don't even want to get to 100 years. I want eternity. I want eternity. I don't want just a few short years. And the longer things go on, the more I want out of this world. And I hope that's your plan too. So just consider what you've heard tonight, that maybe God is trying to teach you a greater lesson of surrender and finding Him in the midst of that experience that you're going through. So thank you for sharing, sweetheart. Our time has run out, I'm afraid, but hormones, yes, but this is such a wide topic. I know you haven't been here for all week, but I've been sharing hormones. But have you got any questions on hormones as far as conditions and what can help with? Yes. Yes. Eat. Okay. 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 Well, it can be a problem with your thyroid gland. I mean, there are certain changes hormonally with the sex hormones that can cause dysregulation of body temperature. So that is possible. Usually it happens more later in life, in the mid-years. But yeah, I'd have to talk to you, find out more questions. But it's often a thyroid issue or a sex hormone issue. That's usually what it is. Did you have a question? Because I know you wanted me to talk about hormones more. What's that? Okay. Okay, sure. I'd be happy to. But as my wife said, if you want normalizing hormones, Vitex is a fantastic herb to take. It helps with all kinds of things, not just infertility, PMS, fibroids, endometriosis, PCOS, amenorrhea, dysmenorrhea, hormonal changes that lead to depression. Yes, for women. It's not for men. Yeah. Yes, unless you want certain things shrunk that I don't think you want to hear the end of that. Yes. But great for PMS. Excellent for women. Now, men with prostate issues, saw palmetto. That's my number one go-to herb. Yes. By the way, my wife didn't mention this. There's too much to mention, but oat straw is very good for also low libido. It's very good for anxiety, depression. It's good for also nerves. It's good for adrenals. It's good for brain fog. There's a lot of things that oat straw are good for. Yes. Oat straw, OATSTRAW. Oat and then straw. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't want to get. We've already gone over time, but I just felt that was important to share because, don't underestimate the spiritual component of health. It's very, very important, and I think that sometimes we don't realize how impactful that is, not only on health but also on our soul, and how that impacts others in their journey. So thank you for listening. You guys have been great. We're going to have another program on Sunday afternoon, and so I hope you can come back. I think that's 2 o'clock, right? That's correct. 2 o'clock, yep. So we're going to cover cancer as well. So if you know anyone that's got cancer, please bring them along. And let's close with a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and I pray the information has been very helpful to those who are listening. And we pray that you will educate us in how we can have better lifestyles, so we can have better health, so we have more energy, that we can work in your service. In Jesus' name.